listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 566.
Welcome back to the Outdoors Station, the longest running outdoors-based podcast in the world. I'm your host, Bob Cartwright, and please help yourself to over 560 podcasts, all outdoor related, in my back catalogue. In part 1, I introduced you to the Sheila on the road, Nikki Love, who took 10 years to get ready to run the 4,044 kilometres or 2,527.5 miles from Cottesloe Beach in Perth, West Australia, to Bondi Beach in Sydney, East Australia. If you haven't listened to part 1, then try to if you can, as it will give you the full picture into what it takes to get to the start line of something like this. In this episode, we hear some of the things that happened along the way. How Nikki received very little interest from the media or even social media, and how unprepared she was for it all to end, and then what happened next. We pick up the conversation where Nikki and I compare notes on both our experiences of crossing the Nullarbor Plain and the spiritual impression it made upon us. Again, people see from the pictures the Nullarbor is basically bush either side of the road, and I know that it took us 3 days to drive across it, and we camped out just driving off one of the side tracks and just drove for a mile or so in the middle of nowhere. I guess you guys did exactly the same thing to keep off the main drag.
Yeah. It was really spectacular.
It's beautiful. The sounds at night and the stars and the colours, magnificent.
Watching the stars was insane. So having no light pollution around, and just looking up, and you just have this. It's an entire blanket of twinkling stars. When I think about those things, running into the sunrise, so going east, I ran into all the sunrises. That experience of watching the earth and feeling the earth moving, because you could, the sun is creeping up over the horizon, and that's because the earth is moving. And I was like, oh my God, I can feel it. The stars fading as the day got brighter, and then expanding as the day got darker. It was such a nature connection. I don't think I've ever felt that before, and it was really, I don't know, it just made me feel tiniest little person in this big thing, but also this big person in this wonderful world. And I got to experience that, and how many people do get to experience that, I don't know, the oneness with our planet. It's just, I know I sound very hippie, but it really was such an emotional experience that I got to do every day.
Yeah. I'm fortunately I can relate to that. I remember the time that Rose and I spent out camping in the middle of nowhere, and the person we were driving across with, her hobby was playing the didgeridoo. So she'd be playing the didgeridoo as the sun set, and sure enough, there were the kangaroos bouncing across in the distance, and the stars, and spiritual is the only way that we both remember it. It's the word that we'd use both at night and in the morning. So it must have been a truly magnificent feeling, and hopefully it overcame some of that discomfort you had at the start of the day before you got into the heat. But when the heat hits you, it's like somebody puts you inside an oven. It's phenomenal. So it's incredible. You just put yourself through that every single day. And what about, I mean, with practical things like water and that sort of stuff? I mean, I know there are road stations every now and again, and they're certainly more regular now than they used to be. And we'll get onto the long section in a minute. But were you able to pick water up every sort of 100 miles or so?
Up until the start of the air highway, so the Nullarbor section. So that was at Norseman. We were able to pick up water all the time. And from that point on, for the next 1,200 kilometres, so what's that, 800 miles, is it, thereabouts? It was in drought conditions. And the roadhouses didn't have water, or they were on rationing. I think I got a couple of showers, but it was a 2-minute shower, but there was no water that you could fill up the van water thing. So we knew this was coming. We knew what we were facing. So we did have a lot of stock jerry cans on the van. And it wasn't. It got to a point where Sharif's doing the calculations, and he's like, "All right, you've got these many days before we know that we're going to get to Seduna. I think it was Seduna, and you've got this much water, and you're using this much water, and if things get really bad, either you'll stop and we'll drive and go get water and come back, because we had the van, we could do that, but it wasn't part of the plan, so we just sort of eked it out." What happened, so whilst I was going ahead, my friend Tom, who was walking across the same route that I was doing, pushing a pushchair, we'd sent him messages saying, "Mate, you're going to have to ask people, you're going to have to ask the truckies to give you water. Everybody who passes you, if they offer you water, take it, because you can't carry that amount of water to go through this space, because there is no water." So I was lucky in that we had the van. Tom had to rely on kindness of people. I was asked, I looked a bit out of place. A woman running along the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, it does grab a little bit of attention. So people did stop and ask me, "Am I okay? Do I need anything? Am I mental?" I didn't actually have to accept. I didn't need the help, but I did take water and when people were offering. So it was we had to take this all into consideration, and thankfully there's roadhouses every 200 kilometres, and whilst they didn't have the water, they had food and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was like 3 or 4 days between getting to somewhere relatively safe.
Yeah. And were you using the same routine that you'd practiced in your other adventures, or with Sharif anyway, that he would drive 10k ahead of you and wait for you to catch up? And if that was the case, how did you interact then with the vehicles that were coming towards you? I know that we've had our own experiences, but I should imagine your experiences were slightly different, being a single woman running along the side of the road.
Yeah, there were some interesting things. So originally I had a running vest on and had my water in there and snacks, and I said to Sharif, just leave me be. First day he left me be, but that didn't last very long. The water got hot. I got uncomfortable with all the amount of sweating. I didn't want to wear my vest anymore. I was being a total diva. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to carry things. I don't want to hold water bottles or anything like that. Can you just, rather than 10 kilometres away, can you be 5 kilometres away? And so we did actually adapt and change. And so the plan had been, 10, sometimes 20 kilometres ahead of me, which is how we practiced Ireland. That didn't happen. 5 kilometres in front of me. What we talked about at the end is that, when there's the two of us, And I get a little bit deeperish and demanding maybe, so he says. And if we did have arguments, he would be a little bit further than 5 kilometres away. And they're like, I'll go 8 kilometres away. That'll teach you. Meanwhile, I didn't know any difference. I was just but yeah, he stayed roughly about 5 kilometres ahead, and yes, I got quite a lot of people, and it was lovely, but also a bit weird that at least 3 times a day, 4 times a day, people would stop and say, "Are you okay? Do you need a lift?" And I'm like, "No, I'm all right. I'm running." "Okay, all right. Are you sure? You're sure?" Yes, I'm fine. I do this little thing called, when I running and I'm sort of feeling down, and I put some music on to sort of keep me going. I run like this, and I dance and jig and everything like that. And somebody did pull up to Sharif and say, because we had a sign saying that there was a runner on the road. So this person did pull up to Sharif and say, "Is she with you?" He goes, "Yes." "I think she might be having a fit." He goes, No, that'll be her run dancing. She's all right. She's fine. But mostly everybody was lovely. Occasionally, I don't know, over 76 days, you're going to meet some people who weren't particularly nice, but you have to blow it off. So a couple of people did drive at me rather than past me, and I didn't quite understand the
Right. And what about the road trains? I gather the road trains are obviously going up and down that route several times a week and a month. They must have seen you and gone, "Oh, she's still here."
Oh man, they are so big. There's a sign that says they're 56 metres long. That's the full length that they're allowed to get to. So 56 metres long is longer than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And these things are hurling at you all day, every day. They don't stop. And yes, I met quite a few who passed me going both ways. So they would truck over, and then they would truck back, and then they would truck again. And I could always tell. So a few of them stopped to say hi. And if they weren't saying hi, then they were like frantically waving. So I figured that they'd seen me more than once because they knew I was there. And people who were working on the roads saw them quite regularly too. So I became known as the Sheila on the road. So trucks have CBs, and we had CBs as well to try and keep in contact, because quite a lot of the time we weren't in phone contact. So for safety, we had the CB, and so we tune into the truckie channel, and then we'd have our own channel. And it was there's a Sheila on the road. Is she mental? There's a Sheila on the road.
Well, I'm sure it kept Sharif entertained anyway, the conversation that he must have overheard. That's brilliant. And now, of course, as I say, coming back to reminding people how big Australia is, you actually go across a time zone. I think that's just before you go into the Nullarbor, isn't it?
4 time zones.
4 time zones as you ran through?
Yeah. Yep. So there's 2 time zones that are really close to each other, and I'm sure it's 4, or maybe it's 3. I'll have that. I'm going to have to look that up. But there's a couple of time zones that are really close, and it's at the South Australia West Australia border, and then there's another one sort of like only another 50 kilometres away, and it's just like, it was ridiculous. How can you be like just over there and you're half an hour ahead? But the South Australia, West Australia, then there's another one. I'm sure that there's 2 more after that. Could be wrong. Might be only 1 more. Got to be delirious. I don't know, but yes, minimum of 3. There was a minimum of 3 time zones that I passed through.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, as we continue along the road now, you've gone through the Nullarbor, or on the process of going through the Nullarbor. You've had your incidents, and you're getting well known by the drivers. Obviously, there's also a bit of wildlife as well, watching you. I think probably from a bit too close for comfort. That must have made you feel a bit nervous.
Yeah. I had been seeing these paw prints the whole way, and when I occasionally went off the so if I took the opportunity to run off the road, there was tracks that you could run along that ran parallel with the road, that followed the water pipe. So there's a big water pipe that goes from Perth to Kalgoorlie, and then splits and goes from Kalgoorlie to Esperance and up north. That is so when I was running along that, I could see these paw prints, and they're big paw prints, and I knew that there's wild dogs, the dingoes, and it wasn't until I got to the Nullarbor that I could actually see them and hear them. You mentioned that you could hear the howling. It's an incredible thing to hear. But it's also a scary thing to hear. And I used the mantra when it was getting up and running in the morning. It's like, what I can't see can't hurt me. But when the light comes up and you can see the things that can hurt you, then you sort of like go, oh, okay, this doesn't work anymore. What do I do? Saw quite a few dingoes, heard quite a few dingoes. And then I was running along, and we'd seen the dingoes in the morning, and was aware that they were around. This had been, so one of the things is if we were close enough at the end of the day to go to a campsite, then we would drive from where I finished to the campsite and then go back in the morning to start. And so on one of these trips back to my start, we'd noticed the dingoes, and Sharif had sort of mental note, okay, there are dingoes up ahead. So I got running, and all of a sudden I'm watching this dingo. I caught something out the side of my eye, and I'm like watching this dingo come running alongside me. It wasn't up very close, but it was 50 metres away. And I kept watching, and it kept running, and I kept running. And it kept running, and I kept running, and I'm thinking, I don't know what this dingo's doing here. But I also knew that there was one on the other side as well, and I'm just like, oh, is it hurting me? Is it what's it doing? Anyway, it just kept running until I outran it. But it was scary. It was incredible to watch, and I just sort of thought, well, that's an experience, isn't it? I don't know that many people who get to run alongside a dingo. I'm glad it's stayed here.
To give people an idea, they are strong dogs, aren't they? They're muscular. They're muscular dogs. They're not the sort of thing you want to go and pet at all.
No. And actually, on that. Shortly after I finished, there was a news article that a woman had been out running and had got attacked by a dingo, and really? She was running along the beach, and she ran into the beach to get away from the dingo attack, and it was only somebody was with somebody saw this and sort of went up and tried to fend off these dingoes that sort of saved her, but she ended up in hospital. So whilst I thought it was cool. They are not, your
friendly petting
dogs. Yeah. Having said that, I've been chased by dogs before, and they just, they attack as well. So yeah.
Well, Anyway, we could carry on talking for hours. This is such a great story. So let's get towards the end. You're now sort of getting. Well, you've got Adelaide. Do you go Adelaide straight to Sydney, or do you go through Melbourne as well? I've forgotten.
I didn't quite get to Adelaide, so I took a left before I went to all the way to Port Augusta, and heading towards Adelaide, but took a left to go through Flinders Ranges and sort of a beeline to Sydney.
Okay, so Adelaide's obviously quite a densely populated place. I seem to remember it's quite artistic at Adelaide, if I've got my memory serves me correctly. Were you sort of people starting to recognise you? Had your story gone ahead of you at this stage? Any of the media people picking this up at all?
No. Having said that, though, we did sort of send out messages to the ABC radio, and I did an interview. So a friend of mine is also on the radio in Geelong. So we organised to do an interview with her, and then it got picked up by the ABC. And they did another interview on the road while I was running. And it was all very quiet until pretty much the very end. I kind of went cross country and just kept going and putting it out into my little world. Hoping that somebody would pick it up somewhere, but it wasn't really until the end. I ran past a couple of people who sort of stopped me and said, "Are you getting help with this? Have you got PR? Have you got media?" No, I'll do it for you. Okay, so she this was in the sort of like the last 2 weeks, and she sort of sent out information. It's hard when you're doing it together. We thought that we'd be able to sort of do a little bit more PR stuff along the way. That just didn't happen because you're either out of radio range or and contacts and all that sort of stuff. So we just kind of kept to ourselves and just plodded along.
Wow.
It got picked up at the end, and on that last day, I did do a TV interview that night. So you know, it got out there, but yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this show, and thanks once again for subscribing to the series of over 560 podcasts. As you probably know, it takes many hours to prepare, produce and promote every show, and as a way to help with our ongoing costs, the fabulous online store valleyandpeak.co.uk are supporting us with a small donation from every purchase made from one of our links, which can be found on the Outdoor Station website or social media posts. And that's it. If you're looking for new outdoor gear of any kind, visit Valley and Peak via one of our links, and it could support the longest running outdoors-based podcast in the world.
So tell us about the finish. Because I know there's a little bit of a story attached to that. So you hadn't actually, I believe you only had a couple of people who join you for a few kilometres running during the whole period of time, even though you've done your PR and a bit of promotion. I mean, normally when people do this, they get people, a handful of the local running teams or whatever come along. But you were fairly solitary right up to virtually the last few miles.
Yeah. I after that interview on the ABC, I was coming into a town, so this was part of the thing is that it pretty much you're always in the middle of nowhere unless you are in these big cities. But I did come into a town and somebody did see me running, and he came and said, "Can I run with you?" And yeah, that's fine. He'd heard me on the radio. So he ran about 10 Ks with me, and that was the only person who actually ran with me the whole time up until that very, very last day.
Wow.
I'm good with that. I've practiced that, running by myself, being on my own, only having what's going on in here. And there's a lot of voices going on in there, so never lonely. And I talk to cows, I talk to sheep, I talk to goats. And so I was surprised to see the amount of goats that I saw in Australia. I didn't expect to see goats. Love goats and llamas. didn't expect to see llamas either. But I learned a little fun fact that llamas are like they protect the sheep flock, so they're really aggressive. But they look after the sheep flock, so there's always usually a llama in amongst the sheep, and they will come and run at you and tell you to go away.
So coming down to Bondi Beach, then you had did you have the local running group join you, and presumably you had a big finish line all set up. Sharif had gone ahead with flowers and champagne and the end, a big the end sign. Go on, tell us all about it.
Right. So I had told people, if you want to come along, somebody who had run it the year before got massive traction, and he'd put a little call out on social media, and so people were aware. So people who followed him sort of became aware of me in these final few days. And as I was running towards Bondi, I knew that my mum and dad and my sister and my nephew were there, and that was pretty much all that I had that I knew were going to definitely be there. They'd flown in, and a few people said that they would, if they were there, that they would be down there. So I wasn't expecting too many people, and sure enough, I didn't get too many people. But as I was running on this final day, I ran pretty much through the suburbs of Sydney, and a couple of people sort of, came out and gave me a wave. So that was, it was lovely to see and feel, because I hadn't expected people to sort of go, "Hi, Nikki," and also it's a little bit like, oh, we're back in civilization again after being on my own for such a long time. As I was coming towards Bondi, I was just taking it easy. I was enjoying it. I had my son on the phone, talking to him, because he was in the UK. I wanted him to be a part of this, and a few people had sort of joined me for the last 5 kilometres. Somebody had joined me just before that, sort of at the 8-kilometre mark, and he was like, "Can I just pick your brains about running across Australia?" And yeah, sure. And it turned out that he was going to do it 2 weeks after me, so he was actually picking my brains about the whole course. So that was nice. But as I came running towards Bondi, it was sort of up on a hill, and the guys that were with me said, "There you go, there's the sea." I was just like, oh. Oh my gosh! Oh, I've done it. Well, not quite. I've still got a bit to go. So they were sort of like, "Come on, let's go, let's run." And I'm like, no, I want to take my time, and you got your time and everything like that. And I said, no, it's fine. I'm just going to enjoy this. So I ran down to the edge of Bondi, and then the finish line had always been the North Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club, which was at the other end of Bondi. So I ran in, Bondi's an alcove, and I ran on this side, and I had to keep running to get to my finish line. And meanwhile, Sharif was sort of all around the place trying to sort of coordinate taking film and footage, and he'd hired an electric bike, and he didn't know how to use the electric bike, and it was all just going to and meanwhile this group of people were trying to urge me to finish fast, go sprint finish, and I'm like, no, I want to cruise through here. And yeah, he hadn't organised a finish line, so one of the guys, Chris, found some police tape, the red and white police tape, so on a barricade. So he's unwound that, and he's like, "Oh, we'll make one." So they grabbed this piece of police tape, and I ran through that and ran towards, and my mum and dad were there, and a few other people who were there I didn't realise were coming along. And went and tapped the wall, And then it was just, okay, that's the official finish line. But I'd started with my feet in the water at Cottesloe Beach. I wanted to finish with my feet in the water over at in Bondi. So I continued on, turned out all the GPS and everything like that we'd been tracking, and then made my way down to the beach. Sharif behind me, running along, trying to put my feet in the water. Once I put my feet in the water, that was it. I was done. So it was incredible, emotional.
Yeah.
I still hadn't prepared for that finish because I was just like, you've got to keep focused, you've got to keep running, you've got to make sure you don't fall over, you've got to make sure nothing hurts. And before I knew it, the finish line had actually come, and I was just like, oh. But yeah, it was the most surreal experience of something taking so long, so much focus, so much effort. I'm glad that I got to experience it with Sharif. I'm glad that I had my son on my phone. I'm glad that my mum and dad were there to watch me. And ultimately that was all I wanted, to make sure that they were there for that.
I mean, you in something like that where you've had 76 days of focus. And you've gone through, as you say, you've gone through the pain, you've gone through the discomfort, you've gone through the focusing, trying not to get hit by cars, eaten by dogs, suffer from dehydration, all the rest of it. And it suddenly comes to an end. And mentally, you must have, it's not so much that moment you finished. I just wonder the blues that suddenly hit you, the sort of the following few days, where you realise you're not doing the same thing anymore. You have to completely recalibrate your brain. Did it take you a while to sort of calm down and refocus?
Yeah, it really did. And there's the mental side of it, but then there's the I'm going to say hormonal. I'm pretty sure it's hormonal side of it. So this high level of cortisol, and then you don't have to concentrate that to that intensity, and actually that then brings on quite a lot of brain fog because it's almost like the brain is shutting down. I don't have to concentrate on this. So the first couple of weeks, my focus on my ability to, keep a sentence together was pretty bad. The decision making as well. So it wasn't so much the physical side of it. It really was the emotional side of it. It was just all right, everything's switching off now. That took quite, like you say, that it's a reboot. It was quite, hard, emotional. It's a different kind of hard. So it's hard running every day for that sort of distance, but then it's hard for it to have gone. And there's a bit of a loss there. There's high emotions, but then low emotions. I'd gone 76 days without any sort of major injury. And the day after, we went down to the beach, and I was lying on the sand, and I said to Sharif, can you pull me up? And he pulled me up, and I pulled something in my shoulder, in my what do you call it, shoulder thing there underneath, in there. So I was actually in pain from an arm injury, and that then made sleeping really hard because it hurt when I laid down, and so my recovery was actually a little bit impeded by this ridiculous injury that I got the day after, where I tore something in my arm.
Good job. It was. Good job it was the day after. Well, let's just look at the quick figures for the highlights of people that perhaps haven't quite grasped the full length of these things. So we're talking 76 days, 1st of May to the 16th of July 2023, 76 days, 3 hours and 43 minutes, a total of 4,044 kilometres, or 2,527.5 miles, which is an average of 53 kilometres per day or 33 miles per day. 10 pairs of trainers, which I have to ask, were they all in the van with you?
Yeah, they were, but I didn't use all 10. So I had 5 pairs that were my right size, and for some reason I decided to order a second set of another 5 pair in half a size bigger. That half a size bigger made such a difference in the comfort of the shoe. And so the second lot of 5 trainers didn't get used. They stayed in the van, and they got space where there could have been, I don't know, water or food or something like that. They just did not get used. So I used 5 pairs for the entire trip. And, you know, I was adamant that I was going to take, you know, I needed a new pair of shoes. And then when I didn't have a new pair of shoes to get into, I just had to use the old pair of shoes and sort of like turn the shoe over and go, okay, which ones look better today? So, you know what, you can run in shoes that are totally run out. So another lesson learnt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't need half the stuff I need.
The longest section with between road stations is the Air Highway, which is 1,650 kilometres or 1,031 miles. Well, as I say, without going on about it, I've driven it. It is a long, long way, and 250 kilometres or 156 miles between road stations. And when you're thinking about to run out of petrol, that's even longer. So yeah, that's a long way. 2 or 3 time zones, we can't quite decide, but there's several time zones there, which there was also crossed. Totally phenomenal achievement. So thank you so much for that. I suppose one of the sort of little sideline questions that occasionally get asked with something like this is, you know, with that period of time, you must have had a complete library of music going round and round in your head on your various days' runs. Were there any particular tracks or particular pieces of music that stick in your mind as something that will take you back there instantly?
I am a very much a creature of habit. So when I did my 63 marathons in 63 days, I created a playlist. And all my favourite songs, quite a lot of Australian songs, quite a lot of old rock songs. I'm a bit old, and that playlist has gone through every adventure I've done. I added a couple more songs, but it's pretty much the same playlist, and it gets played on repeat. I don't listen to music in earphones. I put it in my pocket and have the music just blaring out so that I can hear the traffic. And I had a plan that if I got to 40 kilometres, I was allowed to put on my music. And so I had to reach that 40 kilometres every day before I was allowed to turn my music on. And on days when I was having a really rough day, and there was quite a few of those, I would say, okay, you're allowed to have one song, and when you get to the end of the song, you're not allowed to have another song until you've reached the end of that kilometre. So if I was taking a long time, that was my incentive to get myself moving. And one of my favourite songs, which was a new addition, from the treadmill adventure, was Katy Perry's Roar. So it's the perfect running beat. It's 180 beats per minute. So if you want to know what a perfect running beat is, it's 180 beats per minute. And the words in that are just like so lifting, and I feel like I can win at anything once I put that music on. So that would get me going. But yeah, a lot of Australian songs there. So there was a lot of time to reminisce. A lot of times to question what I was doing there. But it gives you a lot of time to actually think of, this is is what you've chosen to do.
Yeah,
Be proud of it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for choosing to do it, and thanks very much for sharing it with us. One absolute final question. Of all the things I could have asked you about this particular adventure across Australia, what should I have asked you?
No, I think you got them all. How did Sharif cope with it?
Yeah, well, good question, actually. Yeah, how did he cope with it?
He's definitely got a different story to me. So you were in the car driving, and it took you I don't know, how long did it take you to drive?
Three days to Adelaide.
Right. So he drove the 4,000 kilometres to Perth from Geelong. Then he drove 8,000 kilometres in my 4,000 kilometre stint from Perth to Sydney. So that was him going backwards and forwards to me. And then from there, he drove another 1,000 kilometres to get from Sydney back to Geelong, to my hometown. So he spent all that time by himself in the van. He went a bit doolally. It's probably safe to say. But he did say that he probably experienced Australia so more than what most Australians did. Yes, he's definitely got a different story to tell than I have.
Well, maybe that'll be the next interview then.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much, Nikki, and all the best for your next big adventure, which we'll find out at some later stage. And I'll put all the details and contact details, obviously, on the video, and also show notes for all the video and the podcasts. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you for asking those questions, and thank you for sharing that, letting me share that story.
Well, that's it, folks. My thanks to Nikki for sharing her story. If you want to see more, then please check out the video and full interview and pictures, which will be over on the YouTube channel. And of course, all the show notes will be everywhere this is posted. Thanks also to valiantpeak.co.uk for helping support the show, and if you use one of my links to take you to their website and buy something for yourself, it helps cover the hosting fees. Please send feedback or leave a comment wherever you pick this podcast up, and a review on Apple always helps. I know I've got some work to do to get back to the top of the charts again, but as everything is changing for us this month, you'll be getting more from me very soon. So, as always, folks, take care out there, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.